Give me your hand.
Fooly-Cooly Shoegaze is back for one last curtain call.
So if you slept on the premiere, here's your chance to catch up.
So let's go.
Parallel universe appearing from extra dimensions.
What's going on? FLCL Fuji's Endo has reached target values. Here we go at last.
Don't miss Fooly-Cooly Shoegaze in its entirety.
Next Saturday from midnight to 1:30 a.m.
Only Toonami on Adult Swim.
Let's rock and roll.
The following program may contain coarse language, suggestive dialogue, and discussion of violent imagery and sexual situations. It is intended for mature listeners who can tell the difference between facts and opinions.
It's a universal merger on this episode of the Toonami Faithful Podcast. I am your host, Sketch, and with me I have...
everybody's favorite cat, Happy Kuro Kitty.
And we have two guests this week.
Jesse Betteridge, back again.
And Karl Ultraclastron Olson, which makes this, I think, the first half Canadian episode of this podcast. You know what? That kind of a universal merger, because that means we have literally we have podcast universes merging.
Yeah, how about that?
Yes. And we also have the American Adult Swim and Canadian Adult Swim. Those universes are merging together. And the result, at least in Canada, is like a weird ghost creature that looks around at midnight. That's not quite the real Toonami, but, you know, it's close enough.
Sketch the unintentional, many-layered pun.
I didn't know how good that one was going to be.
An incredibly large number of layers. Geez, for the Fooly-Cooly episode, who would have guessed?
I love it. It's
who would have guessed?
It's really on theme.
Yeah. We're on brand today.
Yeah, for sure. So we're going to get right into it with episode 3 of Fooly-Cooly Shoegaze, Far Friend. And the broad strokes are, when we last left our intrusive characters, they were dealing with a bit of a crisis because Harumi has just been shot, and that's starting to activate Masaki's NO. And as we start this episode, Kana's putting those nursing skills she apparently trained for to use, trying to keep Harumi alive. Darn sure that she's gonna keep her alive. She's not gonna let this teenager die. She's not gonna let it happen. Meanwhile, Masaki is reasonably freaking out and, kind of paralyzed by the whole thing. And Konda's down on the ground being like, come on, where's the reaction? Because he's just being that way. But Harumi, in her somewhat dead state, has transported as a ghost being and can see a bit of the past in an alternate universe. Oh, alternative universe. How about that? And
they really went there.
They really went there. And Masaki is the only one who can see these beings from the alternate universe, at least up until now. Now everybody can see these ghost creatures, but what they are is actually shadows of people in the other universe, which is interesting. And Harumi sees back to a very different childhood than the one that they experienced in this universe, and realize these people that I thought were imaginary, they're actually real. I'm actually not supposed to be in this universe. That's why it's always felt so wrong. So after that journey, they come back, and thankfully Kana is able to save their life, And, well, the long or the short is it's not inner turmoil or horniness. No, it is love that activates the power. Who would have thought?
We knew this a while ago. At least we, the viewers, did.
Not sure why Kanda didn't know this, but
he also sanctioned
he's a washed
shooting
boomer.
a teenager, so I'm pretty sure he's stripped of a solid moral base.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Big Gendo vibes off of Kanda by the end of this.
Oh, yeah.
Ethical? No.
Yeah.
He's like, I'd even hurt somebody to get what I want. It's like, well, it's a good thing you didn't get what you wanted.
Yeah.
But as the reaction begins, Kanda does his best Dennis Hopper. We're merging! And yeah, the universes start merging a little bit as everything starts levitating and going crazy, and the typical climax of a Fooly-Cooly. And gosh, so many things are happening, and
I mean, it's pretty clear, like, things are starting to merge, and then they don't, because that's the decision effectively somewhat made by Masaki. Like, it's like,
Yeah. It's reaching a point where it's becoming dangerous, and then a space whale appears out of Masaki's head and stops.
Not at all phallic.
Yeah.
Not at
There was
all.
nothing phallic about that film.
Not at all the most, like, in a show, a franchise, an IP that is literally laden with phallic and yonic imagery. It is in no way the most directly phallic thing they have ever put on screen.
It's so funny because when I saw that thing come out of his head, that was the first thought that came to mind. I was like, it looks like a long, skinny penis.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It is literally the reaction gif. It's literally that's the penis reaction gif.
True. And that's the reaction.
It's a space whale.
Yeah,
it eats it.
Sure, that's what we'll call it.
Eats the reaction at 0.02%, which is apparently enough to send Harumi to the other universe for a more satisfying existence, I suppose.
They went home. And also, I mean, how quickly do you want me to get into, like, what it's trying to say? Or do you want to finish up first?
Let me finish up.
All right.
There's also a moment in there where Masaki's like, can I kiss you? And Harumi's like, look, if you're going to kiss somebody, just do it. Not the best advice, but it did make for a nice moment.
It was a cute little kiss, little romantic interaction between them. And they're teenagers, so it was appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Literally one of the most consensual acts we have ever seen in a Fooly-Cooly.
Yeah, thankfully.
Like,
yeah.
In case it wasn't clear just how much Harumi is not Haruko, that alone.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, it turns out Harumi's not Haruko. Guess you lost that one, bet internet.
That was such a beautiful red herring, and they didn't do it just to be a red herring. But again, that gets into explaining the show. So,
yeah, yes, it does. Yeah. So the reaction stops, and in the middle of the reaction, when people start being able to see brief flashes of the other universe, Kana does see a grown-up Pets, and she's got the hairpin that she took from Kana. It was a nice little thing.
And she saw her too, didn't like? It looked like Pets saw
maybe.
Kana.
Maybe.
Or at least maybe.
Yeah.
It's hard. It was hard to tell, but it kind of. I got the impression for a moment she saw her.
I think that's possibility, but it's all really just a moment.
Mm-hmm.
It's Fooly-Cooly. There's things that are explicitly left vague, as much as explicitly being coded, right?
Yeah, get the meaning that you can from it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So Kanda's super bummed that things didn't merge more, but Kana kind of throws it back to him from a conversation that they had back in Alternative that, you know, things have to change. They can't stay the same.
Yeah.
And she's, definitely seems to have a better outlook on her whole situation too. And just when you think that it's like kind of a bummer that Masaki is separated from Harumi and can still see the ghost and his life hasn't really changed much, they just tack on this middle of the credits sequence where Masaki is able to travel to the other universe and speak with male Harumi. That's a whole thing. And also he's there to deliver a message to Pets, that same letter that fell out of Kana's car in a previous episode. It almost feels like whoever came up with the way to end it before the credits had a very different idea as those who decided what to do during the credits. And
I don't know if it's so much that is just they ran out of space, and given how coded Alternative was with some of what it had to say, decided it's like, no, I'm going to make this pretty damn clear.
This one episode, all of it felt like usually I think with these subsequent Fooly-Cooly series, there's a little bit of miming. You kind of know the pattern and you have a sense of what may happen. And in anime in general, with climactic scenes, like, you know, the hero's going to win and he's going to get beat up and it's going to be a big finisher or whatever. This one, a lot of it, like I want to say 90% of the series in this episode took me by surprise. I didn't see the failure of the merging universes. I didn't see the ending, the first ending where it was like Masaki's back into his miserable life, and then oh no, just kidding, here's the real ending where he's crossed over and he meets Harumi in their own universe. I didn't see any of this coming, and I loved it. I loved that all of this was a surprise. It made it really interesting.
Yeah, it avoids the other four Fooly-Coolies do sort of end on, you know, if we're talking story circles and, you know, Campbellian heroes, they do not end with clean wins for any of them. They, you know, like there's a lot of destruction. There's a lot of things, you know, maybe somebody's been able to move forward, but typically the heroes are just like, oh, I've accepted that this is what adulthood is going to be for me. I'm no longer overreaching. I'm no longer out of pocket. I've kind of, you know, it's all kind of Gilgamesh. It's all, this is burnt brick and good. I'm no longer seeking immortality. That's Haruko's insane bag to chase that. Yeah. Thanks, high school. Sure, that's what I'm sure my parents love it. It's like when we're gonna get you into a magnet high school. It's it's the public system, but there's a lottery. You may not get in. Like, I will waste this to talk about anime for the next 40 years.
I approve of using obscure literature or film or mythology to talk about anime. I do this all the time.
I think it just also it helps like get out of the abs. If we can sort of get into like broader character types here, then sort of really underlines that it like, okay, if that's the other four Fooly-Cooly, this is Osiris. He becomes the space god effectively, or at least befriends the space god. And in that chases, you know, just in the same way Osiris and Isis, the gods from the Egyptian myth, monomyth, are reunited in the underworld. So another world, we have Harumi and Masaki reunited in the same way. It's you know, it's in a sense a very different place for Fooly-Cooly to end. It probably, the fact that Kanda doesn't get what he wants feels like such a middle finger to the Avery builds as a totally separate aside, but in that it is the, you know, the villain doesn't get what they want, Set doesn't get what they want. The person who wants to be able to control these things is held out of is held at bay. Also, yeah, like, you know, let's get into male Harumi, because they managed to take that red herring of oh, this person's uncomfortable because they're secretly Haruko in like a suit or something or whatever. We know that Haruko can take on many various and sundry forms. No, this is because it's literally it's a guy who was sent to another world and is stuck in a body that's not the one that he is supposed to be in the universe he's supposed to be in, and it gets the chance to like actually self-actualize and come back because of the help of a friend. Like it's
And let me ask you, did you kind of get that he was emulating his female form?
Oh yeah,
his sister, or was she a sister or a friend? I wasn't sure. I thought
it's a sister.
So it is his sister,
like
according to the credits.
Recreating his personality as her personality on this Earth.
But there was also something that confused me. And I watched it twice, and it was a little. And I know I saw some conversation about it as well. But there was also talk of an imaginary friend. And how did I just wanted to know if anyone has an explanation of how that sort of factored in or may have factored into
I think it was
how Harumi
before.
Yeah.
I feel like it's like that was like Harumi was told, that thing that you're remembering, this person, this life that you remember, that, it's just you talking about something as you thought. Like, I could think it's like, this is where having 75 minutes hurts both of these sequels is because they don't have that chance to have that little extra 5-minute scene to like maybe fill in a gap and make that a little more explicit. And I also, again, even just the English language descriptive subtitles clear up so much about what's going on in this show, to the point where I'm like, it's not a bad dub from a technical standpoint, from a listenability standpoint. I do wonder how much it, in trying to keep things moving, softened things up so much that it made a few things vaguer than they needed to be.
Interesting.
Yeah. And we know that Harumi's sister exists, right? Yes. Because she just kind of she just vanished in that last.
Well, we don't know until this episode. So initially at the beginning.
No. I mean, in the the last scene of this when.
She goes back. She goes back to the dimension where this person exists, right? She goes. Yeah. So it's like but the thing is when she's in the
sister. And then Misaki goes up to them, and then what happened to her sister? She's just not in the shot. She just seems to be gone.
No, I think it's just not in the shot.
Okay.
I think that's just. I'm
overthinking the wrong things here.
Yeah. Hey, that's fully cool. It's very easy to do that.
Yeah.
You can't fault any of the sequels for not like having meat on the bones. Whether it's everybody's particular, choice of meat, entirely different ball game. But they're all pretty dense. Like I was actually, one of the things that surprised me once it finished up was just like, oh, it's weird, but like grunge and shoegaze actually kind of have at a high level a very similar structure, because we both get these like triptychs. We get, our lead character's perspective first episode, and our lead character is interesting but not broad. We get a middle episode that's focused on a more interesting character. And often a character who's a victim of circumstance, and ironically, whose key moments also involve blood, coincidentally. And then we get our last episode, which is about the person who ends up getting help, who ends up getting their opportunity to like self-actualize. I did not expect that, like going into either of them, that they would all have any mirroring of each other. But they do, and it almost makes their choice of order here make a little more sense in terms of why they ran one and then the other when they're both obviously done.
Something you said, because I read your article, Karl, about grunge, and I really thought you made an interesting point about the length of the series and it telling the story that it's supposed to tell. Like, can you do this in this amount of time? And the thing about shoegaze is, yes, it has a bit of nostalgia and some familiar elements, but it also takes risks. It goes in a new direction, like taking out Haruko, taking out, changing the age of the characters.
Being an explicit sequel. Yeah. Being an explicit sequel alone is completely unprecedented.
Exactly.
Because we never see... We always end on the previous three end on like, okay, they've understood what adulthood will now mean for them as whatever age they are, 12, 15, 17, boy or girl. This is a whole different thing. Like seeing Kana here and you're like the characters that she's evoking are more like Agretsuko or Kaoru-san, like these like burnt out office lady Sanrio people.
Oh
like,
my god, that was so real for me.
It's the hottest new trope in anime.
Yeah, it's
the overworked office lady.
Yeah, and to see that here in full effect, and her whole, I mean, just the imagery in her whole episode, like her flashbacks, especially in the context of the fandom post article where they're like, it's coming out metaphor. And then you're like, okay, so then we see her abducted by a sus agency that's trying to change the world through like weird experiments on her. I'm like, this isn't loaded imagery at all. Like, holy shit.
Yeah, I have to say, even though, I mean, it's hard to see who the main character is supposed to be, maybe from my perspective, because I related to Kana so much more. I mean, obviously the Masaki Harumi storyline adds to, that's the story, obviously, but Kana, like, being a part of it and having her own voice and her own perspective, and her partially being burnt out, but then finding a sort of zest and zeal and like and her place in this story. Like, I really related to that. This is what adulthood is, but she isn't just some boring, lost my way. She's so much more than that, and she's putting that out there through her energy and her response to the situation. She's determined to make sure Harumi lives. She says, I have this other skill that I'm going to put to use. I really loved that. I love that this character had this extra role and that she wasn't just an accessory character to help continue the storyline of these adolescents, that she had her own tale to tell.
Yeah, the aspect of her having the nursing training, like it really comes out of nowhere. And you kind of like it's actually. Well,
I mean, they do explicitly mention in the second episode. They mentioned that she was going to be a nurse, and that they screwed her on it. So like, if you've got the job lined up, you've got the skills.
Yeah.
So like, it wasn't out of nowhere. Why she would have done that?
I forgot that detail. I'm sorry.
Yeah, why she would have done that from where she was at 17, we don't necessarily have a clear-cut understanding of that, other than, if you think about it, she was always under friends' grills. She was always trying to involve herself in other people's lives. And I'm like, okay, I can see where nurse falls from that particular kind of busybody.
But she had the skills lined up that, could have sort of helped her guide her into a more fulfilling adulthood, but instead she's just roped into like these experiments that are in a way infantilizing because they require a latent power that she has that is like inherently tied to adolescence.
Yeah.
So, and then it just diminishes over time, and then she just becomes useless and in this halfway, like in this limbo between being an adult but not actually being able to function as an adult in society.
Yeah, it's an incredibly young Gen Xer to general millennial narrative, for sure. It's that like they've done a really good job, and it's something. And the reason I'll bring up young Gen Xer is like this is a vibe that goes back to like Malaise era Japan, where it's all like, hey, you know how you expected to have this whole thing set up and you're going to do all this stuff? Yeah, everything's broken around you. You can't. You like no matter what your skill set is not valued. You can't self-actualize because of organizations making choices that beyond your control. Yep. And in fact, those choices may be directly exploiting you and directly infantilizing you. Like it's like it is as subtle as an anvil to the head, and it's the better for it because it's the kind of thing where it's the kind of thing that, in the sense that this is responding to the other Fooly-Coolies, and in that responding to a lot of the big anime tropes, the otaku tropes that have driven the last 25, 30 years of the medium, to sort of explicitly sort of jab at some of that stuff in the context of shows that are normally hyper celebratory of Bildungsroman type stuff. That's a huge choice. Like that's like, to me, that's a bigger risk than saying Haruko's not there, especially because, okay, Haruko's not there, but like very interesting. It's like, remember, Haruko in the second episode pretends to be a nurse, Meanwhile, we have our Kana actually being a nurse, actually doing these things.
Nice.
Like there's like a real compare and contrast here of the person who's playing it. Yeah, the person who's playing an adult, but who is actually forever 19, critically 19, not forever 20, 19, not, below this, below what we literally see Kana skip out on. This, person, and who's always chasing this ridiculous thing that we know is self-destructive to her, even just in the context of the first series, but certainly given the context of everything else. And here's Kana is like the rejection of that. It's like Haruko doesn't have to be there because Kana is like, hey, here's what like an actual, proper person would be doing in this situation.
Yeah,
Human
she serves as a good contrast to what Haruko represents.
Yeah.
And then and then they replace the quirkiness and the need to fill that quirky personality with Harumi. Yeah. But her pathos is completely different. Her reason, which we find out later, it's because she is a he. And she and it actually kind of reflects back on the question they ask in the first episode, which is how do you shake up this world that you feel you don't belong in, that doesn't feel right. And that's because it wasn't right for either of these two characters. Well, actually, for all three of them. And so they had to have, even though Kanda was not happy with how everything turned out, I felt like the other three characters, minus, Masaki and Harumi being able to connect up until the end, got some part of what, they were trying to do is shake up the world, make a change and see how it impacts everything. Doesn't make a difference.
Well, advancement, right? Versus like, return, like Kanda is the ultimate like regressive boomer, just like, exploiting shock doctrine to try and like, get the youth to do his bidding. He's a fucking liar. I actually, in my notes, I have loveless fuck who lusts for death because he can only see birth as a zero-sum game. And I'm like, yeah. And he's chasing a woman who's way out of his league. He is ostensibly chasing Haruko.
So is
in the same way that's implied.
Question. Was that his entire motivation for all
I think
of this?
I think it's not for all of it, but I mean, because like he talks about so much other stuff. He talks about like his lost dreams and stuff that like clearly he thought like if I can just get back to the reality that I'm like, he doesn't necessarily feel like that's a reality for him either, but it's not because he thinks like I need some new third thing. He's like, I just want old stuff. It's that really backwards nostalgia bomb kind of thinking. It's delusion. Yeah, he's like, everything was good back when Cokes cost 5 cents and I could get a penny whistle down at the store, and it's just like, fuck you. that never happened.
That is an interesting regression from where he was in Alternative.
I think it's the events of Alternative. It's like there's a huge difference between like if he's like you add another 10 years to like wherever he was, and having this idea that like I'm going to do this thing and then that not working. Like I think there's a certain kind of it's midlife crisis shit. I don't think he was in that space yet, and then he hits that right. I say this staring down the barrel of 40 in a month. There's ways to handle that are productive, and there's ways to handle that kind of realization that just takes shit out on everyone else. And Kond is obviously supposed to exemplify that in part because he is a Gendo. He's like, I've got the thing that I fucking want, and I'm a bitter old man, and I've been chasing it forever, and I don't care who I hurt in the process, even if that's like somebody who's by the time you've spent 10 years with somebody who's your junior, like they're close to you and he still doesn't like us. Like if he could have hurt Kana to get what he wanted, would have the whole time. Didn't care. Like that's psychopath shit. And again, like that broad, it is sort of, he's not there just to be a character. He's there to resemble an ideology that, is not without, as much as we complain about our intransigent politicians in Canada and the United States, oh boy, like Japan.
There was something interesting at the very end when Harumi recognizes Masaki. He says that he thought he had dreamt it, and I was thinking about that because he recognizes him.
Yeah.
I mean, what did his reintegration in his new reality sort of reset all his memories? Those were years that he spent on the other planet, on the other Earth. and an entire life, an entire family, presumably an upbringing, as we saw from certain flashbacks. So I thought that was a really it was a strange like bit of dialogue, because it made it seem like that all didn't establish itself in his mind, and he had just reintegrated back in his new dimension with a bunch of false memories, and including growing up with his sister, etc. So I didn't, that was the one thing I didn't really like. It would have been better if he had maintained some like sense of his dual reality life,
Yeah, it's hard to say. Like, this is the second you're saying, like, we're going to do this alternate universe stuff. It's like, well, we can make up whatever rules we want, and it gets to be what's narratively convenient.
That's true.
I think what was interesting is that you see Masaki, and he's still clearly blushing and like head over heels for Harumi, however Harumi is. And when Harumi has that moment of recognition, you see the same kind of, not the same quite the expression, but the same kind of like,
Masaki really said,
connection.
I love you in every universe.
Aww.
Well, yeah. Masaki's like, Masaki's like, I don't see gender. Like, I don't care.
Well,
if I'm in this universe. Like, it's very sincere. And I think it's interesting because that's also like, if alternative ends on, as some have suggested, this poor queer Kana being screwed out of her first real love. She tries to play it being straight and doesn't stick. Doesn't fucking, you're like, oh, I'm in this cliche anime love position, shoujo garbage position with this guy I've supposedly got a crush on, and just nothing. No reaction whatsoever. And in a world where, of course, if there is a reaction, we will see it visual and explicit as an NO reaction, nothing. And meanwhile, she tears the universe in two for Kana. Or for pets. Excuse me, for pets. But then that sort of being sort of like, okay, so, that is that kind of very similar to Naota, I didn't win kind of thing. It's like, yes, people carried on, but like didn't really get the win out of it. And to see very explicitly like, no, Misaki became a space god, or became friends with a space god, and
is that a space well in your pocket, or are you just happy to see me? His name is Adamesk, by the way.
You're holding on to that one, Sketch, and I appreciate it.
It's again just the most phallic thing in a show who literally built on the backs of Freud and Jung originally.
So
like
he's just his new interdimensional traveling buddy now. Like they're just gonna go and pop worlds. Like, how does this work?
It is interesting, but it's like, on the other hand, like, Masaki is the first person we ever see Adamesk actually talk to, like, from the first episode onward. Like, this first person, like, okay, you can see me, so I'll actually talk to you. I'll acknowledge you. In a way that there was
no Haruko. Maybe that is why.
I wonder,
he doesn't have to hide.
He doesn't have to bail. There isn't this lady who wants to eat me around. So let's chat. No, it was
man-eater.
I mean, Prague, right? Like, it's not hyperbole. It's just technically what she does.
Pregnant. Yeah, let's not talk about that.
Levels to that. No, it does end on such a different and upbeat note, and in that, well, yeah, it's like without, in a very artful way, it is a narrative about essentially like each of the characters that get their episode arcs are in their own way like some kind of queer, and it's really neat that they make that work in a way where I don't think that's then a prerequisite to considering it. You're just like, oh yeah, that is part of what their character is. It's not incidental. It's not tacked on. It's definitely central to their motivations. Yet everybody can on-ramp into it and get like why that matters. And I think it's really well done in very specific narrative ways. Whether it all perfectly hangs together, again, I feel like it'll just be so easy. Like Grunge, it'll just be easier to watch as a movie. Like the credit breaks, and certainly, oh my God, and Jesse could speak to this, the ad breaks in fucking Canada, do not do it any favors.
So this one did have worse ad breaks in a way than the other ones, because the second ad break this time was like quite early, quite a bit before the actual end of the episode. And because you didn't have a clear cut to the credits, you can't just easily put an ad break in there. But it might actually be for the best that they moved it forward a little bit, because if they had placed it differently, then people might just assume that you're just going to have a regular ending credit sequence and with no mid-credit, crucial, critical context changing mid-credit scene like we got. So, I mean, if you're in the situation where you have to put the ad breaks in, I mean, I guess that was there was thought was put into making that decision of where to put it. And I should point out that I think that these ad breaks might actually be determined by Adult Swim in the US and not by Adult Swim Canada, because that's what they always said. That's what YTV always said whenever they had weird ad breaks for like the Biotics anime. They'd always say like, oh, Viz did that, or Funimation did that, someone. So
sure. It still feels like a weird spot to like put them. I would. It is a reminder.
They're not designed to have those ad breaks in.
No, not at all.
Like, even more so than third-party acquired anime, because Adult Swim made this. They made it for their format, which is one ad in the middle.
No, it's definitely built around like just ad break in the middle, and then all the way through roll of the credits, and then afterwards. It's meant for 2 ad breaks per half hour. At most, and even then, like it's definitely going to like it's just as the other 2 sequels were released. The Blu-rays are even in film form in Japan. This is going to be the same way. Like there's going to be movie versions of this very clearly, and they're going to probably just feel better. I think
I'd watch that.
Yeah.
Sketch, what did you think about? I remember the last episode we were talking about it. You wanted a little more length. What did you think about the length in this series?
Up until we came back from the commercial break on this episode, I felt like we were going to manage to get it all in. Mm-hmm. But then they crammed a whole lot into the last 10 minutes.
I agree.
Yeah, I think a lot of that is just trying to get the most focus on Harumi's arc and just everything about them in this episode, and that caused it to be a little overstuffed, and a few things to be unclear, some questions, some good things to be asking, some maybe things that should have been clearer.
5 more minutes
with that whole thing.
10 minutes. Like
5 more minutes would have helped a lot. One, I don't think they really needed another episode, because all of this stuff needed to happen in the last episode.
I think they were much more economical. I think the team behind Shoegaze was much more economical and adaptable in making things work in 3 episodes than the staff of Grunge was. They both took more or less character driven or character focused approaches in how to divide the story up in that format. And I mean, for the most part, it was probably the best decision to make in both cases. But yeah, I think they overall did a good job of just sort of making it work in that format. It feels episodic still. In my opinion, I think actually having it broken up into 3 episodes is still better.
I don't know. It's like this one felt less episodic than Grunge.
Oh, for sure.
Grunge definitely only feels episodic because it really does try to very much do the Rashomon 3 perspectives. It's built like segments of of like Kill Bill or something like that, almost, where you're just seeing like this character story, this character story, this character story, and then finale. Like it's that kind of. And when Tarantino does that, he's aping various and sundry Japanese
and also, I guess,
with that move.
It's probably worth emphasizing that Rashomon was a movie, so it was one movie.
Yeah, yeah, and there you go. It's like so in that aspect of, if you're going to do those kind of split ups, it can feel weird to do it with episodes as opposed to not. And like I said, like ad breaks, which just made it feel every time I could like rewatch it. Besides, like I said, then I'm really focusing on, I turned on descriptive language and when it was as it aired, and then also obviously again for the subtitles for when rewatching in Japanese. And yeah, it just flows better if you can just watch it through. Both shows just don't feel like they hold together as strongly, because it is counting on you to kind of keep some stuff like, Kana's nurse training kind of fresh in your mind. And with a week gap in between that, you get back to, hey, you know how you always have to watch Fooly-Cooly twice? Well, that's why, especially if you've got these gaps between.
Well, then I guess it's a good thing for the viewers that they're going to play every part of these episodes in the next coming weeks.
I think that's kind of clever, actually.
It's worth a rewatch. These are worth a rewatch, because there's a lot of little throwbacks to the main series and the other series, and just general references that will make more sense the second time around, and a lot more nuances to pick up. Like after I sat down and I read a couple reviews, there were things that I had missed that other people had picked up on, and probably vice versa. So I think that rewatch is a good one. I do want to say the Shoegaze it's a bit of a stretch. I was in the minority though with the grunge as well, so I might be in the minority here. I think referencing Shoegaze music was a bit of a stretch in this. I think I understand what they wanted to accomplish by making that reference. There's having a bit of an indie feel, but so when I think Shoegaze music, like even with something more guitar heavy noise like My Bloody Valentine, I think of it as like sit on your bed and stare at the ceiling music, and you just kind of feel like the noise just makes you feel, right? This I didn't quite I don't quite see the connection between the story and the music, and it may have been that this was just a convenient title for the sake of having one that's a reference to a type of rock music.
Well, and it's another type of rock music that is one of the many influences on the Pillows. The Pillows is like an alternative pastiche act. Like they do grunge tracks, they do Britpop tracks, they do punk tracks. They do they have it all in there. They definitely have things that are closer maybe to a shoegazy kind of washed out, distorted vein.
They
added
into like their tracks and parts, and you can tell when it's there for sure.
Yeah. But at the same time, it does. I mean, that's one thing with the somewhat strange structure of grunge is I can say like a grunge song, we have the verse, which is this character story, and then we have our chorus, which is this taste of the finale, and then we have a verse, and then we have a chorus and taste of the finale, and then we have a verse, and we have our big chorus finale with like the at the end, and then we kind of fades out into feedback, and like I can see it structurally. Or at least I can ex post facto apply it to it and not feel bad about it, even if it was in no way intended and was entirely accidental. I don't know if there's quite such an easy mapping here, other than like, okay, it's awkward, difficult, and indie. Well, I suppose that is kind of shoegaze. I'll give it to you.
Or at the most basic level, shoegaze is apparently a spin-off of alternative.
I mean, yeah, at that kind of... and when with grunge having already taken that particular sticker or label out of their hat for that one. It was interesting to sort of like, the other thing that kind of struck me just sort of like stepping back from it after it was done was like, it's kind of wild to think about when Adult Swim started, like very quickly there was, because of circumstances, like they pulled the Teddy Bomber episode of Bebop repeatedly. And here, many years later, we just have like the whole plot is teenagers blowing up a building. Just kids doing terrorism is like the driving plot of this.
That's so funny. Yeah, it's so funny.
It's like, it's so strange.
I didn't think of that.
I said it in the first episode. It's got
terrorism on a tower, no less.
Yeah, I was like, they're straight up doing this. They're gonna they made a bomb and they're taking it up the tower. That is happening. Real life.
They are literally doing it in Oklahoma City, because they literally say it's a diesel fertilizer bomb. Like that, like they are like no, obviously not to the scale of a Ryder truck, but no exactly verbatim. Just
as
like
fantastical as all of this was, I want to say that this particular series got the most real with me.
Yeah,
like
it's incredibly grounded.
Okay.
it's incredibly grounded. Even the setting, like the aspect of, we see in alternative a lot of imagery that is meant to evoke, no matter how else they want to cut it, it very much does evoke the kind of footage that came out of the 3/11 disaster in Japan, that earthquake and the tsunami, where and they show it in very similar ways. This detached thing of the iron going through buildings and inside, like the kind of thing that looks like surveillance camera footage, because that's what it's mimicking. And we see the town 10 years later, and we see that kind of like, yeah, some shit's kind of rebuilt. There's also this dumb tourist boondoggle. Like, it's very much like they in no way avoid that kind of like, okay, so here's 10 years of later what these kind of places ended up like in real life. It is more of that grounding is setting. I mean, probably the least grounded thing in there is the blatant product placement of the Honda electric car we will never get in North America that they gave Kana, but what does at least serve as, again, another sort of like anti-Harukoism. Haruko's still like, I'm gonna buzz around on my little Vespa and be forever 19. And
it's also kind of a fun callback to the episode in Alternative. I think it's the second episode of Alternative when Kana had to drive.
That's true. Van. We see her driving.
She's like, hey, I think I might be good at driving.
It turns out she is, but she's still got a reasonable electric car. Like she has the reasonable EV in contrast to Haruko and her junkyard, as we now know. Vespa.
I still think, though, the shoegaze reference, it doesn't quite fit, because when I think shoegaze, you think like distorted guitar, like this indistinguishable sound fluctuating, and
I mean, I guess they do have
a good amount of distortion,
though. Like, every character they're not, I mean, distorted maybe, but the characters are distinguished. They're not all kind of layered together. They have individuality, they stand out, they have characterized storylines, etc. So like, it doesn't quite fit. Maybe I'm missing something, but I mean, would pick different music to qualify this.
To the extent to which distortion and vagueness comes up, it is that there is this blended world that we're seeing through Masaki's eyes. So we're seeing this distorted interlinking of dimensions. And when we see people jump between dimensions, we see literal distortion, literally signal fading in, fading out. Stuff in the case of Harumi's episode, but it's again, it's the kind of thing where it's like, much like me saying like, maybe the structure of grunge is grunge itself. It's me being exposed back to, it's like, we have distorted imagery with these ghostly figures and stuff, and these the haunting kind of aspects of it. Again, it's. We think
not
too deep.
Sit in your bed and stare at the ceiling episode. It's
no,
you have to be fully engaged.
It's fully coolly. There's no point in any fully coolly where you can't just be giving it like 300% focus.
Yeah.
Regardless of whether it always manages to hold it together to make that, despite that, make sense for everyone. That's what it's trying. They're all aiming for that, right? They're all aiming at that level of trying to keep the ball in the air.
Well, it's psychedelic, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Jesse, were you saying something? I think I interrupted you. I'm so sorry.
Oh, no.
Okay.
Wait, I've got something for Jesse, though, in terms of just speaking of production history and stuff. I realized that Jesse, since those Canadians are here, Fully Cooley sequels and spinoffs are basically the Spider Riders of Toonami, because they're production IG third stringers and subcontractors doing a co-pro.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, I think we talked about in the last episode. I don't think production IG actually did any work in these. I think it's pretty much all Studio Nut at this point.
Well, it's Studio Nut
and a bit of River Root.
It's not for this, and then it was Mont Blanc for grunge. I hope we see more out of
I'll
Mont
certainly
Blanc.
take Nut over
Mont Blanc?
over Mont Blanc, but also B Train. So
both of them are better than B Train. Dear God.
Oh no, Fooly Cooley done by B Train. Ooh.
There's a timeline where that happens. There's a timeline where that happened. You realize this. There's a timeline where B Train doesn't fold. Adult Swim gets the rights with IG, and there's a B Train Fully Cooley.
Oh,
Talk about your alternate universes.
What a dreadful
Oh my god.
concept.
No, I will say that because just on ambition alone, I do hope we see more out of Mont Blanc. Nut obviously is a lot more comfortable with giving people what they're going to expect aesthetically from a Fooly-Cooly. Like you can just like, there's a whole bunch of shots where you're just like, Jesus, that's a 2004 shot that could have been dropped into anything Gainax made around there. You could have dropped that into Re-Cutie Huddy. You could have dropped that into a Benabashi. You could have dropped it into even, Gurren Lagann a bit later. It's just the whole pose, the whole layout, colors, background, everything. Nut is very happy in that space. I would be curious to see what they can do when they're allowed to have more of their own voice. I'm pleasantly surprised by this director, given, yes, just endless panty shots, and apparently from a history of that from other works. Yet again, weird, okay.
I forgot how many there were in alternative, but when I was rewatching it, I was like, oh yeah. It's actually quite a few.
And despite that, Uemura made the conscious decision to give Kana a pantsuit in this one. So.
Yeah. Well, and it's the weird little tells of maturity versus not. And also, like I said, like just the fact that you can have a show that is otherwise reveling in being puerile, but then has this very, explicit message by the end of it of love and acceptance, no matter what. That's an interesting place for a director to come from. I'm like, okay, this guy's got a voice that I want to see. I want to see in other contexts. I want to see not bound up by an IP. Like, again, just like when I got to the end of Grunge, and I'm like, boy, I hope I can see something else from this studio and these people, so I can see what they get to do, and they can do something on their own, because that's what we got with Fooly-Cooly originally, is we got to see what some people could do when they're on their own. I want the same thing here with Nut and the director here. Is like, to give this person a blank check to, even if it's just another 3-episode thing, but their own 3 episodes, not stuck in these rules, because clearly they have things that they're struggling to kind of weave in here. Like, we haven't even talked about like how this is, we kind of touched on like how this is almost a rejection of a lot of
there's more mature themes in both of these series than there were in the other 3, I think. I
could see that for sure.
I mean, we talked about alcoholism in one, and this one, I mean, the teenagers were older for one thing. Certainly, the element of, I guess, gender dysmorphia, or just in general.
Yeah. No, this is straight up like the transist, gayest Fooly-Cooly, and it's it's handled with it is handling these mature themes with like straight up honesty.
Yes,
and
there's
great
no
care.
questioning that like gender dysmorphia is the entire basis around the 2-dimension idea here.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's not an incidental point. It's like the whole. It's the whole basis.
Well, and just like the whole thing where she's like, or I should say, he is uncomfortable in uncomfortable in the clothes that they themselves made. They're like, these clothes, these tags are digging into me. It's all like, it's one genius use of red herring, because you're just thinking like, oh, this person's very Haruko code. It's just going to be Haruko. It's just Haruko fucking with us again. It's like, no, this person has their own drives, their own reasons, and put it this way.
They felt wrong because it was wrong. They didn't belong there.
Well, and it's like it's this great sort of play on, like, again, Haruko's not in this show, but we see aspects of her character or rejections of aspects of her character in this. If somebody's acting like Haruko, you can do it for the reason Haruko's doing, which is just fucked up and selfish. Or you can do it for the reasons where it's like, no, I'm not in my right place yet, and I'm trying to find that. And that's what we skip through Harumi, and like that's really clever. That is a deconstruction in the same way we see touched on in alternative, and touched on by virtue of progressive saying we're not going to do Freud, we're going to do Lacan and Zizek instead, and we're going to like a bit of that. This brings it into much more central focus, while again not really eloquently. I think there's a propensity, especially. There's ways of doing that where you're just going to break the flow of the show because you don't actually know how to handle it otherwise. This just keeps the ball moving the whole time. You're just along for the ride. You're on the same page as the character. And by the end of it, you're like, yeah, you agree with them. You agree with how they
could
came
have
to
done
their
without
position.
The 10-minute candy shopping session. To
They
be
can't.
honest.
Well, I do like how that they tie back to that in episode 3. They were talking about the curry candy in the last episode. And you have all these. What were the weird candy? Weird.
Curry.
I guess quote unquote mature
candy.
Candy tastes. They were bringing up
curry
cream
going
of corn candy.
Yeah. Well, and curry going all the way back to the first Fooly-Cooly.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's a callback, but also. I think that aspect also of like, I want every flavor. I don't want to settle for one person's idea of what I'm supposed to enjoy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like there's a level to that.
Sure.
And you know what? I'm not even going to enjoy that the way you expect. You think I'm just going to be a glutton, but I just want it for the aesthetic. I want every color in the rainbow
Karl,
for an aesthetic.
You've blown my mind a little bit with seeing past the surface, and I always like to think that I can do that, at a fair pace, but you've picked up on nuances that I didn't quite think of. And I honestly think you said you watched it twice. I only watched it once. Some of these things are things I think second time around.
I think that's just always been the problem with Fooly-Cooly. Like I remember the first time I watched from the first series, the first time I watched Firestar, I just didn't know what the fuck happened. I just didn't know what the fuck happened. And you go back and rewatch it and you're like, okay, it makes a little more sense. And then like, that's one thing I will say. I don't know if it's additional years of experience on my end, but I have never felt like, Jesus, I just need a fucking director's commentary. Original Fooly-Cooly actually just genuinely benefits from the director's commentary. Like it's like Advid Notes level of dense. None of these sequels have necessarily been that bad, but on the other hand, it's a lot easier now to be like, oh, I just want to just rewatch these things on repeat. Well, I don't even have to swap discs. I'll just throw this thing up and just keep streaming it until it makes sense. But yeah, no, like it is interesting. Like I really I've been very I was really. At first, I just thought they were kind of trying to tack too much stuff on, and then certainly on the rewatch, I'm like, geez, they really made that work, and it all calls back, and it's interesting because that is something that structurally Alternative did. Alternative has, lots of I love you and stuff in kind of the first episode and the last episode, and we get that kind of like, back and forth here of like the things that you're like, all of the stuff that they're saying that seems just like out of pocket in the first episode makes sense by the last one, but you kind of almost have to then go back and watch that first one and be like, no, like, yeah, is Harmony being shocking? Like, of course they are, because they're not fucking happy.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, like, why are they talking about like drinking piss? And you're like, because they're like, they're about to jump off the side of a building. They had reason for it. Like they literally, like, again, in terms of like imagery that they're between the sort of explicit implications and then the implicit of, oh, you're showing a character with that background doing that in the middle of that activity or being subjected to that thing. Wow. Like they didn't hold back on anything. Like
it does strike me that Harumi is the character that stands out to us the most. But Masaki is the one with the NO. He's supposed to be the Naoki typecast, unsatisfied with life, the one who prompts all of this, who has the ability to bring these worlds together. And I felt like the ending, minus the epilogue, he kind of faded back, he kind of just melted a little bit. And
it's interesting because it's the same thing we see all with Shinpachi too. Like we see the character that actually has the magical powers is in a sense, both of them deconstruct as like this the person with the magical powers is the least actually the least interesting one.
Oh yeah.
Because it's absolutely. like they have agency that's not even human. How do you actually relate? How do you actually relate to that?
No, they're
how they are interesting
for this ability. That's what they are.
Yeah. What makes them more interesting, or the way that they can be used in an interesting way, is how do they help their friends self-actualize? How do they, how are they motivators for other people, right?
And that makes sense because she was the only friend he had, and he loved her, he loved them.
Yeah. I'm so glad. Just the fact that we have to do that for a Fooly-Cooly actually makes me like low-key ecstatic, because it's something that's like so of all, like it's, people are like, did these things need to exist? And I'm like, you know what? If we had gotten 5 Nautas out of this, Christ, no, they had definitely would not have needed to exist if they were just completely rinsing. If they're in the position where we have to reconsider kind of like if we have to actually like talk through stuff that's complex in the same way that like the original series made us have to talk through stuff that's complex. Okay, they're still technically a cash-in, but at least they're respecting a certain aspect of why the original existed, which is to try and like put so much on the table that it's hard to parse, that it's challenging the audience. Yeah. This is still clearly challenging the audience. Like we're the kind of people like to talk about this shit all the time, and even we're like, fuck, how do we talk about this character? That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I said when I was on the last episode, Masaki he's kind of a wild card throughout the whole thing. He has the power. You don't there's this question of what exactly will he be able to do with it when the time comes, and so much of it is just narrowing down on how to just kind of embrace and express this empathy for his friend, and he has the opportunity to as we're all as the whole thing's kind of building up to is Kanda's objective here of wanting to unfuck the world, and he can do that, but it's like, what exactly is unfucking the world going to entail? It's not really clear, but unfucking the world it's something many people think will solve all their problems, and that's not going to happen because we don't know exactly what's going to happen when you try to do that. But when he's in that position, he knows that, or he seems to know that, this, what he can do is he can fix this one thing fully and completely. And we were talking earlier about Harumi having false memories or having experienced a false life or forgetting everything that happened. And I don't think that's the right way to think of it. Yeah. I think it's that when Masaki corrected things or made things right or created the world that seemed right for Harumi, he did it fully and completely. He went back, he was able to go back and insert them back into the life they were supposed to leave, and they experienced that life across time and space. And would he have been able to do, would that have happened if they had fully merged the dimensions together? I mean, it's possible that wouldn't have been possible, but it was possible for that one person. And in the end, that's kind of what was the most important thing, and that's what he was able to do.
It's also
that was my takeaway from it.
No, I think you're right, and it's also, I mean, we've been kind of dancing around it, but like in the ways that this is a bit of a response to a rejection of some of the notes that Evangelion Rebuild ends on.
That's another thing that this reminded me of. That as of today, you can buy Evangelion 3.0 plus 1.0 on Blu-ray and 4K Blu-ray from the good folks at G-Kids.
Oh,
nice.
But I mean, in the sense of how it's very interesting to see that there is that key difference of how the world that Shinji essentially builds in response to the circumstance versus the world that Masaki builds in response to circumstance, and what they choose for themselves going forward being very different things. And again, explicitly evoking Evangelion imagery during the course. It's like, no anime shows water washing up onto a beach when you're based off a Gainax anime without knowing exactly what the fuck you're doing. That is, this gets into, Fooly-Cooly will show you something for half a second, and the whole point is it's supposed to evoke 26 episodes and 4 movies. 5 movies. That's the problem with it. Why am I bouncing off of this? It's because you're not keeping 50 years of pop culture on a Rolodex in your head because you're reasonable. You're not insane. Positive connotation. That aspect of this, though, where it kind of instead of being, I like how, to be clear, I like how the rebuilds ended, but it is very weird that it's all Shinji ends up with a woman who's like 50 years older than her. It's like, it's just, the whole thing's like strange. Like ending up with Mari is strange. It's a strange way of handling it. It makes sense in the context of this all being somewhat of a metaphor. Whether Anno likes it or not, like even if he doesn't think of it, his brain did. Like at a subliminal level, it's very, him coming to terms with his life, his love, etc. Letting go of teenage loves for the mature loves that he found. Fine. There is something very poetic in Misaki being like, I made friends with a god to come across worlds to be with you. Mm-hmm. Wow. Like, and again, not having to say that, showing it through the actions. You say that, it's corny and shitty. That's bad writing. You show it, that's what you're supposed to do, because you're in animation and you have complete control of the medium. You have every opportunity. Cute too.
He looks so happy.
He's happy and blushing. Like he is local spooky gay teen hooks back up with their gender fluid SO.
Yes. I'm glad you said
Mars.
that. He's a
on
teenager,
Mars.
and it's a teenage expression of feeling. It's so perfect.
Yeah.
It's just where it's supposed to be.
And again, like, just for that to come from the guy who's like throwing panty shots everywhere as a director, and then apparently has some other show that what was the show that you guys mentioned last week? Punchline. I'm gonna have to watch Punchline now. Like, that's what sucks. I'm gonna have to go watch that.
Yes, Karl, you should watch Punchline.
Should I watch Punchline? Sketch? You know me. Is this something
I haven't actually seen it, so I can't wholeheartedly recommend it, but I mean, if you liked alternative and you like this, then I don't see why you wouldn't also like something else from the director.
But man,
this is definitely a Fooly-Cooly for people who have enjoyed other Adult Swim titles and are a little older. I don't think at 13, and I could be speaking in broad strokes. I could be entirely wrong. I'm not sure at 13 you can pick up maybe on some of all the nuances in this. I could be entirely wrong, though. You could be a 13-year-old queer person who sees this and be like, that's me. I understand all of this. I relate to this character. I think
there's something for multiple audiences here.
Yeah.
This probably different. More so than any prior Fooly-Cooly actually had a message for an adult.
I think it also it needs to be stressed that you won't pick up on any of that until subsequent viewings, because it does not click until you see that thing, that scene at the end that changes the context of everything.
I'm
apparent.
I'm wrong here. I take back what I said, because we're all biased because we've seen every other series in this time. So I take back what I said. I think Sketch is right on point. He says there's something for everybody. I think he's right.
I will say,
not everybody, but at least two different kinds of people.
I
will say that maybe more so than grunge, this probably, Jesse and I have both lamented on our episodes here. It's so strange that we're getting these things as orphans without the context of the rest of the show. However,
I would love to find somebody who has just like randomly stumbled on this on Canadian TV without knowing what it is.
But I will say,
what their opinion. Talkback opportunity.
Yeah. If Toonami Talkback opportunity, if you suddenly stumbled on this and then decided to listen to extremely long podcasts,
please tell us what your experience was watching this for the first time. We're very interested.
But I will say that this probably stands alone a little better than grunge, and honestly probably stands alone a little better than alternative or progressive, because of that aspect of, you have, at least between Misaki and Harumi, a kind of clear narrative about like what they were realized about themselves over the course of this thing. Yes, there are some flashbacks here. There are some things where on an additional rewatch, even again, if you're missing these other pieces of context, look, it's Fooly-Cooly. It's always had a lot of jargon that can imply something, and is certainly at points being used as an explicit stand-in for whatever particular psychological framework they want to play with in that particular series. Mm-hmm. However, this feels like, I think specifically, you mentioned like, how is like a queer 13-year-old going to watch this? And I'm like, I don't think they need the rest of the context. I think they just watch the whole thing and like, okay, that one particular narrative makes sense. If they go back and then kind of watch alternative, Kana's narrative in the middle of that will make more sense.
Yeah.
And I think also it's like, I think the interesting thing is like, it's very interesting to look at like Kana and Harumi as like, particularly like the, button down, more closeted, less feeling comfortable with expression kind of like Gen Xer, millennial kind of queer versus like the like, fuck you, I will be on Tumblr and I have smoke for everyone. Zoomer queer that Harumi is. And it's like, that's again, the fact we're talking about this in a Fooly Cooly, just
it's a good way of putting it. It's a good way of putting it.
It is. It does make sense. Yeah.
And the thing is, it's just like, it's like, to me, like, again, like, are they making good use of the framework? Yes. In the same way that like the original Fooly Cooly says like, okay, all this super, Freudian and Ava, we're going to crunch it up. We're going to young it up a little. And we're going to make it super tight. And we're going to get Fooly Cooly out of it. But it's still basically, it's a young man's hetero love story.
It's a really sweet one too. That scene where they kiss, and then the ending scene where he finds Harumi are just so precious. And
I love that.
Leaves you with a good feeling.
I will say, I love that by the time they kiss, strictly speaking, the audience already knows that like Harumi is not just like a girl. Like that's like, because we see her flashbacks. We see like these. Like that is just that's we showed this and then also just again callbacks to the original Fooly Cooly, mouth to mouth. What do we finally actually see here? Actual mouth to mouth.
Well, also
there was another callback to that with Kana and Harumi too, where she's actually resuscitating.
That's what I'm saying.
I mean, compare that to Grunge's callback to that scene. Like there's actual subversion going on here.
Well, yeah. Well, no. Whereas Grunge is like, we've shown these Fooly Cooly bits as a way of. Whereas Grunge says, we've shown you these Fooly Cooly bits as a way of saying, now here's three kids who actually kind of self-actualize in a way that's probably more positive than Naota, in various ways. But we've shown that with the expected imagery. Here we've said we've instead of like, we're going to show this like cartoony hidden kissing, etc. Nope, we're going to just show a person actually doing CPR. And then the kiss, we're not. Then the kiss, we're not going to build. Then the actual kiss we're going to build. We're not going to build in a way that calls it back. And by the time you see that kiss, it's not another het kiss and Fooly Cooly.
No. And it's also two consenting teenagers at the same age, rather than a semi-adult kissing a very young adolescent, which always was a little odd to me. I was
I gotta say something here. Okay, so
say it, Sketch.
The reaction that Harumi has to getting mouth to mouth from Kana is a total rejection.
Yeah.
Of all of that.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yuck. And also maybe a clue that Harumi, even as a female in that universe, doesn't like girls.
Yeah. Well, and then they like
Masaki. That's who they want to be with.
Yeah, they like Masaki, and then even once I'm back in my universe in my right body, I still like Masaki, still down. Like that's.
I wish they'd held hands or something. I don't know. It's just a little finger touch.
I mean, it would have been great if they could have gilded the little Lily just a hair.
Yeah.
Fire Funny used Lily as the imagery here, but we'll flip that around.
No, like a little finger touch, like a little bit of something.
But just the realization, the fact that like clearly Masaki's like just, you could just see it on his face, and then that moment of like again, that's where you're just like, okay.
He's like, I came to find you. It was so cute.
Well, just the moment of realization on Harumi's face, where you see his face, and that like, that's the kind of click that when you see that kind of click in real, like it captures, it's very good animation character acting stuff. That's that kind of stuff that's like, how do people end up like super into stuff like in and like Isaacin, like how do you end up like those type of people? And you're like, because you'll see something like that, and when you understand like the kind of emotion they manage to communicate, what they instead of having to show, God, the only way I can show this is if they're holding hands or smooching. Like, no, I can show it with the realization on their face that they just found like a lost love. Like that's art. That's like, you know, that's a punchline, because it's like, it's subliminal.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm gonna say something that no one's gonna agree with.
Go for it.
I liked the animation in Grunge better.
I will say that as somebody who is pretty tolerant to a lot of different styles, grunge was at least a very coherent aesthetic. I know Jesse does not like it, could not get past it, and I'm not much to blame you.
Like I said, you have to meet it halfway, and I can't do it.
Yeah, for me, it wasn't a meet halfway. I'm just like, I was able to step into it and be like, this is a different approach, a different take, a different lane. And to me, that was also just sort of like I could step into it easier by saying it's like, strictly speaking, this is the kind of thing I want out of more reboots. Like, I remember 20 years ago on the Toon Zone forum talking with, I think it was probably like Matt and Corey and the usual gang there. And I think it was like they were doing some sort of Looney Tunes reboot, and it was just like characterless. And one of them just pitched like, they should just be giving these things out like random shorts, different directors, so that we can each see their flavor on it.
Oh yeah.
And that is as close as what we got. Like, grunge was the first time we really got somebody saying like, we're really good. Progressive does it kind of a little, but it doesn't quite hold together. It doesn't. You don't want to necessarily do that during the course of the show, or if you're going to do it during the course of the show, you have to do it cut by cut, the way the original Fooly-Cooly did, where you'd have like cuts that are just obviously this person, this person, this person. Trying to do that at the episode level gets a little more confusing, though I guess, again, since it aired as a film in Japan, maybe that scans differently. Here, Nut is like, hey, we know how to be that era of Gynax, and bless them. They're very good at it. They they hold that down. Whereas, grunge, like, it was so fresh to sort of see, especially because they weren't like, it'd be one thing if it was just 3D puppets and models, but they pull in these different little bits here and there. Like they felt. And they pull it in a way that isn't the Gohan's way of like, we could put the camera, like I said, they understand that like still rules of physics have to apply to how you compose a shot. They understand that, but then they say like, okay, given the physics of this shot, what do we decide to render?
Grunge reminds me a little bit of earlier Orson Welles with like experimental style changes to see how it fits within an existing framework, and I really liked it. I thought that was a lot of fun. I've said for a while that I think Toonami would benefit from a lot of creative animation style choices that I enjoy, like what's the series called? A Blade Runner did, by having a different style of animation. I enjoy having those creative nuances, and I did kind of like the 3-person storyline structure. I like that. Shoegaze was a great series. I think it stands on its own in the Fooly-Cooly lore. Personally, I resonated better with grunge, and it may have been a visual thing and also a stylistic thing for me. Just my own choice.
Obviously, is the certified fanatic on the episode. Both hit different pockets for me. Like I said, Orinoco's story for me just just reminds me of places where people grew up. Like, it just reminds me of like family roots back to Butte, Montana, and stuff like that. For me to see her like in these kind of like burnt out mining town type places like that, just calls that kind of stuff back in a deep, real way. And like to the point where I was like literally shook the first time I saw it. As someone, it's like with this, it's hard for me because it's like, no matter how you cut it, like I'm a middle-aged, cis white het male. But I really appreciate when I see like well done queer stories. Always have, like, and it's part of what kept me in anime.
Authentic.
Like I think like the third or fourth thing I did for like Toon Zone for write-ups was like Gravitation, which is corny, but it's the kind of thing where it's like that kind of stuff managed to like literally broaden me and make me into a better person and more tolerant and respectful person. And to see that in the heart of something like Fooly-Cooly, which was the kind of thing that got me into those writing positions, I'm just like, I really appreciate it, because it also means like I'm keenly aware of my privilege of how many of these anime stories are geared around people who basically live my life experience in some way or through metaphor, right? And to see that broaden in such a way that, like, even if that isn't your direct experience, you can still relate and emotionally connect to that. That's, again, just fantastic. That's the result you can hope to get, especially out of something that has, like, yes, this is an IP thing. The idea that you're trying to create like everybody talked about that line where DeMarco compares it to Star Wars, and you're just like, pull up. And, by the way, bless DeMarco for linking to my article. Yay.
Yeah, that was a nice shout out, by the way. That's how I read your article.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Thoughts connected. I really actually genuinely have to thank him then. No, like I wouldn't.
Sorry.
As much as this is weird that it exists, so far, and then, of course, it should be a your mileage may vary thing. Like, it shouldn't necessarily, if you're doing Fooly Cooly right, the idea that given the average kind of level of engagement people have with any sort of given kind of material, media literacy, personal tastes, it shouldn't ring for everyone except for people who want to just tear stuff apart. I mean, that's part of why I don't write as much anymore, because if I did, I'd want to write everything. People are like, you're the Fooly Cooly fanatics. Like, no, if you threw any show over my wall these days and said I had to do it because I was getting paid, one, you got to pay me a lot. I work at tech. I'm doing pretty well. But more to the point.
Hey, all I want is a One Piece mug, okay? My expectations are small in this world.
My expectations were destroyed by getting DVDs and for free back when they were $30 for 4 episodes, and then
that was a pretty good pay scale back then.
I mean, I should have been actually paid, but we were making no money. So what can you do? I know that if I were to anything I'd want to bother to write about, I'd write about with that level of depth. And there's plenty of other shows where I could probably do that. I picked up my Eizouken Blu-rays the other day. I bought that at a physical store, even thanks to Jesse tipping me off. And I was just like, oh man, I want to rewatch this. But if I rewatch this and I'm in this mode that I'm already in from Fooly Cooly, it's going to be bad.
Jesse, where does this stand for you in the lore of Fooly Cooly world?
Yes. By all means.
Wait, you mean sorry, do you mean chronologically?
No, I mean how do you Stitch said that you had strong feelings about grunge. How did you feel about this?
I wouldn't say I had
for you.
I wouldn't say I had strong feelings about grunge. I just kind of didn't like it very much. I just found it off-putting, and I could not click with it. Even though I did watch the whole thing. There are some things I liked about it, but ultimately it just didn't. It really fell short, and I ultimately just kind of am not as big on the Fooly Cooly spin-offs that try to take a wild reinterpretation of what makes Fooly Cooly, and then trying to imitate that. Mm-hmm. I prefer the route that Alternative and Shoegaze have taken, where you're just taking the essential, the very core elements of Fooly Cooly and going completely against expectations and not trying to recreate what the original was doing, but just doing something completely different. And I think Alternative is still my overall favorite sequel to the original Fooly Cooly, but Shoegaze is, if nothing else, it is definitely I think it stands pretty well on its own. I'd probably rank it just below Alternative, but I mean it's also just a really nice addendum to Alternative as well. But I like just seeing the thread of how many perceived essential aspects of Fooly Cooly can you remove in each sequel and have it still be Fooly Cooly. And I almost would like to see Uemura keep going to the point where we can just. What happens if we take out the Pillows music? What happens if we don't call it Fooly Cooly? What happens if we just keep making things and that are indistinguishable from a distinct property, but can still be perceived as a sequel of Fooly Cooly? I think that'd be kind of cool. Maybe. I mean, it's kind of almost what Gynax did. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of almost what Gynax did, because I mean, in many people have said hey, the real Fooly Cooly sequel's Diebuster. In the sense of spiritual inheritor, and I can see that angle to it for sure. I like Fooly Cooly Alternative more. I like Fooly Cooly Alternative more than I like Diebuster.
Yeah, well, there you go. There you go. There's the hot take. No, it's. I mean, it has been interesting to sort of see what people do and don't retain, because it is also a reflection of what we do get to see sort of what given directors and writers thought our Fooly Cooly was to them. So even if it's something it's like, that wasn't what I wanted out of a Fooly Cooly, you can be like, but I can have an understanding of what somebody else thought of the original work through this work, even if it doesn't all hang together. Which is, that's a whole separate write-up. It's a whole other tangent. And it's been interesting. You mentioned it's like, this is a good addendum. And I'm really glad it was. Like, there was a huge possibility here that even with the original people involved, revisiting it might have done damage to Kana as a character. And I already kind of liked her arc. It was a very interesting arc. Yes. Is it kind of an unclear ending, at least as we originally got it, as to what happened? Yes. We now have that clarity. That clarity did not damage that ending. That clarity didn't hurt her as a character. And everything we saw added was, if anything, weirdly reassuring, because I think if you were to be the kind of person who's like, I was at Kana at one phase of my life, and now I'm at Kana this next phase of my life, and what are you going to do when you are that, like, burnt out OL, right? Like, how do you handle that? And the sort of that aspect of saying, like, just because you're fucking 27 doesn't mean your life's over, is like the key sort of thing we can take from Kana's arc.
And we need to put that in every anime ever, because I'm really tired of seeing this peak at teenage years bullshit. Holy crap.
I think you're right.
Me when you said that, it was like,
it's an annoying cultural thing.
Well, it's an annoying cultural thing. It's also, boy, for something that's so wrapped up in rock music, there's a lot of weight to the line. There's a life after the age of 27. Specifically, like, I mean, what Fooly Cooly grunge, Cobain.
Forget 27. There's a life after 16. Like, these people seem to not
of course. Get it. I'm just saying, it's like they even managed to work in like the old rock numerology stuff in there. Whether they intended it or not, happens to fall out of it. Great. That's the kind again, the art of doing this is sometimes you get some freebies. But yeah, like, no, it's that, to, in a sense, that aspect of something that was probably I was missing in Fooly Cooly, which is that, like, every fucking adult in the Fooly Cooly up until this point has been kind of like some degree of awful and shiftless. None more than Haruko, the adult who doesn't want to admit she is one, and thus is, forever 19. To have Kana just sort of be like, my adult life didn't work out. Well, fuck it. I still have the things that I have, and I'm going to be a nurse, and I'm going to, in the moment, I'm going to actually, I'm not going to, it's not, it's fight and flight, not freeze. Like, that is, and they get, again, yet showing her still at the end playing catch with Kanda. Like, she's not like, I'm going to just throw my whole thing away. It's like, I'm still an adult. I can't just, like, fucking throw everything out tomorrow. But at the same time being like, but I'm going to be an absolute dick while I'm playing catch with Khan and just keep throwing it on the ground. Like, just little subtle stuff where it's like, I'm putting up with your shit, but am I? Like, that's adult self-actualization, isn't it? It's like, I'm putting up with your shit, but am I? And that's something that's, again, explicitly absent at Fooly Cooly. Like, they explicitly make Naota's dad like a terrible man-child who writes fucking Ava Dojin. And we see sort of, and progressive, Idomi's mom's sort of arrested development about, not sort of listening to her daughter and what her daughter's needs and wants are. Alternative, it's so interesting that Kana's parents are non-people, almost. They're not even, they barely exist. And like the interesting thing is we see in Harumi's parents in the alternative universe, her sister's being like, she's being weird. Nah, I don't like it. And her parents are like the first time we ever hear parents being like, people are like individuality these days. It's like the first time we ever hear like just supportive parents. And it's in the context of our trans character. It's just like, just keeps pulling these bits out. And again, 5-second scenes here or there, putting this stuff together. And yeah, Kana being, again, our first reasonable adult in the entire show. Even more so, it's like, they kind of try to have, the anti-Haruko and progressive, and it doesn't quite hang together. It's like, no, here's just a regular person. They literally had superpowers.
And that's why she's the most accurate anti-Haruko, because she is a regular person, but also one who managed to cross that threshold into accepting adulthood.
Yeah. I mean, and you know, and that it, you know, wasn't necessarily an easy thing to cross, and that there were people who obviously part of adulthood is people screwing you over in one way or the other, and they just show all that stuff on screen, make it very explicit. You know, like I said, the imagery of her in the lab was like the first time I saw that, and just with the, you know, context fresh in my mind for rereading stuff and my rewatching stuff, and it's like, woo, that's spicy imagery. That's very spicy.
Ghastly.
That is very bleak. But they put it all together. They make it all. You know, they don't just. That's bleak, and but now she's just a sad adult, just like everybody else. It's like, no, you don't have to be. You don't have to be stuck in Arrested Development like all of the other adults we end up seeing in Fooly-Cooly. You can actually kind of be in a state that you're unhappy with, and you were stuck kind of on nostalgic. You was thinking about your old friends that you don't talk to and shit, or you can be like, all right, hey, there's actually things to do here now, and I'm going to do it, and I'm be happy to get it done, and I'm going to save this person. Like, it was just that all that. I guess, getting back to the core point, they didn't fuck up her character at all. They actually added everything you would hope to see in a 10 years later for a character like this, in a way that's vastly more relatable. Like, there's something. I mean, in a sense, it's like she's a gifted kid metaphor. Oh man, you're the fucking cleverest little fucking youngin', and then you're a burnout. And to say like there's a life after that, I'm sure for a lot of people, self included, you love to see it. You love to see, because you never see that in anime. You never see, you know, like it'd be like doing a sequel to like the most recent Gundam, and you just have like an episode where it's just like, you know, Suletta, and she's like, yeah, I used to be like the world's most badass Gundam pilot, but now I'm just her running the school.
Yeah,
like that's
Recovery
like
of an MMO Junkie is the only other show on the top of my mind that has had a positive demonstration of life after adolescence.
Well, without it being sort of like full-on midlife crisis recapturing. Exactly. Like they're like, it's like, I love Legend of Black Heaven, but it is the most midlife crisis show to ever midlife crisis and midlife crisis.
Oh my god, yeah.
I adore it, but it is like, as a washed musician myself, it's like, even when I was 20, I didn't have to think that hard and think like, yeah, it's gonna be me at 40. I get it.
So Sketch,
that this is not that with Kana.
Where does this fall for you in the world of the Fooly-Cooly?
So
everything
in preparation for this discussion, I rewatched Alternative, and you know what? That ending gels with me a lot better than it did back then. So I think this easily falls just behind Alternative for me, but it's a great extension of it. When we were coming into this show, I was like, all right, cool. Kana's here. She's an adult now. What are they going to do with this? I want to see what adult Kana is like, and they delivered. They totally delivered on that, and as Karl mentioned, they didn't mess it up along the way, which is an accomplishment.
Well, especially because like with a few kind of IPs we've seen with sequels lately, it feels like the easy thing to do is just have, you know, we've returned this beloved character, and they're, you know, like just nothing about him is what you wanted to see later. It's just like, it's, you know, like it's always something. It's always a downer, and this didn't have that without being pedantic or talking down to the audience. It just showed like, well, no, when you get into this situation, this is what you do, which is something that I think, again, has always been key to like Fooly-Cooly in terms of how it tries to discuss growth as a person. Is like, oh, you're in this situation and nothing interesting ever happens here. Well, here's how you don't deal with it in these negative ways. You find where you're supposed to be at that phase in life. And they figured out how to do that narrative for somebody where that phase in life isn't some level of adolescence. It's actually fucking adulthood.
It is, however, a shame that we didn't see if Mo-san became a model.
I mean, they did show that she has sick color in her hair. So, image, so, you know.
That could mean something. It could mean that she's a hairstylist. Which I could totally see for her. That seems like the kind of job that
It would be really funny if we had the breathing room to have her catch up coffee clutch style, and all of them are in some phase of burnout and are handling it in different ways for the purposes of compare and contrast. You can use that in a way that further enriches that narrative, where it's like, nobody, because that's very realistic. Very few people. You have a big crew of friends in high school or college or whatever, and the odds of you actually lining up exactly on where you thought you were going to be pretty fucking slim, because adulthood is very different. Things happen. Stocks crash, etc. They could have
went to my 20-year reunion this past summer, and boy,
that was brave. I wouldn't have done it.
I'm glad I went though.
My 20-year reunion would have happened during COVID lockdown, so I'm glad.
No interest.
You mean they didn't delay it? I mean, a lot of those got delayed, but I digress.
I'm just really glad we managed to go an hour without saying coming of age. I'm really fucking tired of hearing people say, "Oh, Fooly Cooly, coming of age." Stop it. Stop. You're being trite. It's been said. Let's move on.
Yeah, this one isn't actually so much about coming of age.
It's not this straight up. It's less the hero's journey, especially in that. So again, this is
definitely
neither
not a hero's journey.
Neither this or grunge are about these solitary journeys. Yeah. Both of them reject what the prior three did in terms of them centering around some sort of, magical. Some average person who gets thrown into extraordinary circumstances. It's an explicit rejection of the Campbellian monomyth type shit, because it's about team efforts that result in team success. And maybe some other people didn't get what they want out of it, like old corrupt mayors and shitty Gendo wannabes didn't get what they want out of it. They're not supposed to. They're supposed to lose. And the people who are supposed to have a future are supposed to get one. And the people who are supposed to be in the places where they actually belong and in the places they feel actually comfortable are supposed to have that. Because these other people are just clinging to something that they need to fucking let go of. That's the one thing we haven't had a chance to maybe show in a Fooly Cooly is one of these types of people kind of being like, man, I've been kind of a dick. But I mean, put it this way, if there's a version of that story to tell, it's probably at some point, if Kazuya Tsurumaki ever gets this back in his palms for some reason as the IP, and he wants to tell a story of how Haruko finally grows the fuck up, that might be one other thing you can do in a Fooly Cooly. That might be the one thing left that we could do that would be really fresh ground. But what they've managed to do between all four of the sequels is kind of fill in enough other sides, other perspectives that were, okay, the last thing is like, well, what happens when the eternal 19-year-old realizes, like, you can't be, I mean, Kanye West is a problematic figure, but, we're forever 21, but just turned 30. Yeah, it's kind of that's no way to live. And
it's also super cringe.
Exactly, yeah. For somebody who talks about how cringe everybody is, girl.
Yeah.
Little self-realization could go a long way.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of cringe people around you, Haruko, but on the other hand, no one else is like making out with like fucking literal children. So just so that you can try and eat a space god that clearly doesn't want to deal with you, but isn't just like, oh, I'm a space god, I don't deal with anybody. Clearly willing to play ball.
But we love her for being this ridiculous character. However, this series benefited enormously from exploring what it could be without her, and that it could still be essentially a Fooly Cooly story.
Yeah. Well, and it's in her absence, you realize it's like, oh, it's another way of saying, yeah, she's the problem. She's not. She is a malevolent force in this world.
Yeah, her and then the boomers like Konda. Sorry.
Yeah, like
that
she's
was
not
a little disrespectful.
No, it's true, and she's not necessarily that different. It's not. It's true, and more people should be saying it.
She thinks she's different, but she's not.
She's just as selfish. Like that's always been underlying back to the original series. She's playing Naota to get what she wants.
And apparently sometimes she forgets that she doesn't actually have to, make mouth contact to make things happen. She just has to hit people in the head.
To be fair, she really realizes that because of grunge, because she gets her it's great. She can move to physically abusing children to again, so she can eat a space god. It's so ridiculous.
That makes the whole take of Kanda being like that, killing this girl in front of this person in front of Masaki would activate his NO. It actually makes less sense if the initial premise is that some kind of sexual awakening is what activates it, which we know it's more complicated than that. Yeah. Then, his assumption that death would be that'll do it, it's really odd. I don't know how he came to that conclusion. It would have been better if he'd tried to inundate the poor teenager with a bunch of naked people. That might have been the equivalent.
Should have been singing "Kiss the Girl"
or something like that. Yeah.
Look, we see in the first episode of Prague how to do this, which is you just go to a high school classroom and you run pornography at teenagers, which is what Haruko did in Prague.
Scene.
That's so fucked.
Thank you for reminding me. I didn't need to remember that.
Not you, Ida. I don't need anything from you.
Yeah, dude, don't worry. I know, dog. But I mean, but the thing is it is that parallel of hey, here's her running experiments on kids. Here's Kanda running experiments on kids. They did a lot of ways of saying Haruko doesn't have to be here for the kind of things that she embodies to be here. It's just she's the candy coating. She's hey, you know what? Maybe this stuff isn't so bad because at least it's coming from the, this fun Looney Tunes type character. And you're no, it's not. That's no better from her than it is from the ugly boomer. It's the same MO to get NO. Levels.
You're right.
Yeah. It's her absence was I'm glad because there definitely would have had room to breathe. And honestly, then really the only reason for her to be there is to be she's running the show with Kanda. That would be the point, was be she'd be running the show with Kanda to try and put things together, right? That would be the idea. That's not as interesting to me. It's more interesting for sure to just sort of have her out of the picture and then trust the audience to get why she's not there, why you don't need her there. I don't know.
It was a good series though. I am gonna be a fan of we can tell a story in a set amount of time. It doesn't have to be 24. I mean, traditionally, I love long-standing animes. I love a story that keeps going and going because then it gives me more content. But I think if your goal is, I have parameters I need to reach, I want to tell these basic elements of a story, I can do this in 3 episodes. Absolutely. If you can do it, flex those creative muscles.
Yeah.
Write that script, do it. And honestly, this is one of those things we talked about with Alien in the last episode we did sketch, where writing is really critical in this. It's not just about, planning in advance and having character development and good voice acting and animation, but you have to have superb writing to be able to bring it all together. Now, yes, this could have benefited from another 5 to 10 minutes extended episode, and I even think the grunge could have benefited. Maybe
for sure.
From another episode, but I'm more of a preference of an extended 3rd episode.
Yeah, I would not mind a 30-minute because that would also that would evoke the original OVA. That even the original OVA couldn't really do it in 6 25s. It needed a 35 for it to really all hang together, which means it was really almost more like it needed 7. And especially because of the triptych, grunge peak valley structure of grunge. Yeah, if you're going to do that, you really need to be in a position to then maybe, if nothing else, hey, every grunge song also has usually a solo piece in there somewhere in the middle there, even if it's just playing the same basic melody as the verse or the chorus. It needed that kind of 5 to 10 minutes to maybe let it hang together a little stronger. or at least just to abridge the flow. It might have also, those might have been, I don't know, with things like that, I don't know if it's like just add another 5 to 10 minutes literally in between these two scenes, or whether it's like 30 seconds, 30 seconds, 30 seconds, 30 seconds, 30 seconds, you know.
Yeah. You know, though,
right? Little,
I think about like the way this series in its remakes has focused on the music, and it makes me think of how Watanabe really does that a lot in his series, and I kind of love that theme. I mean, obviously I love music, but with anime I like to see more visual cues and creativity. But it is really fun that they explore the musical side of Fooly-Cooly through having, you know, we're gonna cue in like grunge, alternative, progressive, shoegaze. We're gonna try these different styles and make them into and mold them into something that fits the Fooly-Cooly theme. You know, I'm actually really curious, Sketch, do we have any good talkbacks? Do we have any good
we have a variety of talkbacks of varying lengths. I'm gonna try to get through these relatively quickly.
Go for it. So I should shut up because we're already at like a minute and a minute and 47 seconds. Excuse me, an hour and 47 minutes.
Yeah.
Karl's enthusiastic.
Exactly. At Toonami Live wrote in solid themes, acting, music, and visuals. The Gurren Lagann / Samurai Jack reminiscent ending somewhat sours the experience with what I assume to be a confounding allegorical statement. Overall, an enjoyable, emotionally resonant series about loneliness.
Okay.
I don't know if I would make the Gurren Lagann and Samurai Jack comparison.
Not Samurai Jack.
I mean, explicitly not, because he does actually get them back. Whereas, like, if anything, it's a response to those. Again, it's like, well, I gotta have
vanish,
I gotta have a sad ending.
Well, you know, the person tweeted because that's what resonated with them, and essentially, this series does sort of reflect what we all.
Yeah,
I do think this series resonates loneliness very well for Kana, because she can't see pets and she doesn't even get to spend time with her other friends. And of course for Harumi, who, you know, feels like she's completely isolated. I mean, in this universe,
literally is isolated, literally in the wrong body.
And Masaki, who feels like nobody can possibly understand them, and they've completely closed themselves off.
Yeah.
So loneliness is a huge theme here, and I think that's a very good observation. At Die No Problem writes in, they got me with the short-haired girl twist. I had to watch it twice to realize Harumi missed the others so much that she altered her appearance and even voice to remind them. Her weirdness, though, that's 100% her. Way to make me use my analytical noodle FLCL.
Oh, I love it. Love it.
Yeah, they modeled their female persona after
their lost sister, which I thought was amazing.
Sister.
It's just, and I mean, that's interesting to me too, because it's like it calls back to like other like queer narratives I've seen in like manga and anime, like the character Hado from Genshiken Nadame. Their whole aesthetic is a reflection of one of their high school friends initially. And as they kind of become more their own person, they break with that a bit more. But it's like nobody even realizes that until that person happens to turn up at the college, and they're like, "Wait, what the fuck?" And then you get the backstory, and to see that just sort of like, "Hey, actually, we can basically do that whole thing 3-minute scene. We don't need chapters for this." Like, again, you're right. Writing is so critical. Storyboarding is a huge piece of this. It's like it's not just the words that they used; it's that they've not just cut the fat, they've started to cut the muscle. It is a very lean, tight show.
Yeah. And some might say that it suffers for that, but others might feel, no, actually it juggled what it was trying to do pretty well despite that.
I think it's most like both this and Grunge feel like 95%. Like, you know, like they, in terms of like, I think they got most of what they needed to get out. If they'd had 100, it would be easier for people to get, but I don't think they are at the point where it's like, it's unparsable to a majority. Maybe I'm wrong.
We're also conditioned to expect animes to stretch out that way.
Yeah.
And
Three hour marvels have ruined us.
At Blue Blade 131 writes in, it wasn't bad, better than Grunge at least. I kind of wish it was longer and that Kana had a little more time. Felt like her arc kind of didn't go anywhere. I disagree. But
Jesse,
you can have your opinion.
would you disagree that Kana's arc went, or agree that Kana's arc went?
I actually did disagree, but my mic was muted, so disagree.
All those opinions we missed. Shame.
Yeah. Stephen Barnhart wrote in, it was the best series finale ever. I'm sad that the FLCL universe is not moving forward. I'd like to see what more is in store with this series, but I'm glad that it got a 5-season run.
Nice. Nice take. I like the positivity there. That's not something I've been seeing a lot on Twitter. I like it.
It's very interesting to see the extent to which this show's own fandom reflects perhaps best Haruko and Kanda. They just want to chase this thing that doesn't exist anymore and have it.
Interesting.
Sorry for bodying you, audience.
Yikes.
I don't know. To an extent, are you also bodying the production people?
No, I'm actually bodying myself because, you have to be some degree of not right to be talking like me about this, about a cartoon.
See, that's
I am so close.
Though.
I will say I'm not Kanda, but I am probably Nauta's dad.
The only show I've ever felt loyally devoted to in terms of nostalgia is Samurai Jack. I have always, and you can ask the other people we record with and the Toonami faithful, I'm always willing to embrace new things as long as they're not Tokyo Ghoul. I'm always willing to embrace new things, but Samurai Jack was
But we will, however, be skeptical of live-action gargoyles if Greg Weisman and his people are not involved.
Okay, live action in general is a whole different conversation. We don't have time on this podcast to dig there, but leave gargoyles the fuck alone. That just sums it up.
Total monkey spa. Ad Blue Blazer RX writes in, it was great, my favorite FLCL, and I wish it had more episodes this season.
Aww.
That's very sweet. I don't know what you could do though. It is just so. I said, it's these triptych style things where you just have these three perspectives, albeit this one, like I said, Shoegaze blends them, so maybe that's the distortion much more distinctly than grunge does. But damn, I what would you you could add more, but is it just sort of here's these guys being more sad, here's how they built a bomb, do we need it? How much do you need to? What do you add to the stew here?
I just am enjoying all the people really embracing this more than I thought that would happen.
I mean, honestly, they probably could have done it in 2 episodes as long as everything that happened in the last episode happened.
Yeah, but
then you wouldn't have had as much time for Kana, which would not be as good.
Well, no, and Kana's narrative, like I said, very critical because it's so new to Fooly-Cooly to say, no, actually you can be a functional adult, even if you're in a dysfunctional situation.
That's Kana.
A dissenting opinion at Gundam Prime Zero writes in, it was painfully average. It doesn't feel like FLCL at all.
Okay.
Yeah, all right. Sure. What is FLCL supposed to feel like?
It doesn't feel like the original per se.
This wasn't a young boy's coming of age. I'm you have 1 million shows for that, dog. They make those every season.
See, this is why the coming of age thing makes me want to cringe inside. I just can't hear it anymore.
Cringe. Everything's cringe.
Cringe!
JJ writes in, I loved it. I just wish that there was more of them.
Okay.
More of all of them. I think that implies that they wish there was more grunge. Possibly more of the other ones, too.
All of them are characters where you'd boy, I want to see how they end up as adults. I'll give it. I'll say it's that's interesting because of course that's where I'm at this point in life. It's
we also want to see what Naoto's like as an adult. At least I do.
Kind of, yeah.
It's just him being like it would be really funny. He's just like the ultimate like gifted kid burnout, especially because his his brother's like a pro ball player in the States. Yeah. What it is like, does anybody know if Ichiro Suzuki had a brother and what their life was like? That's what I think now is going to be like.
Huh. That's an angle. That's
definitely an angle.
At Wolf Guardian 75 writes in a different ending, but all in all, it was good. Too bad it's come to an end.
Okay.
Yeah.
RBLX Cole writes in, this is the best episode ever, to be honest. I can't believe it's over since it was just 3 episodes, but I'm looking forward for new FLCL. Well, about that.
I mean, never say never.
Yeah,
boy, Michael O'Lean
things.
sure said that a lot.
Yeah.
10 years from now, someone's going to be like, let's do another one.
It's at some point, time passes, whatever bad blood is there disappears. Like I could easily see eventually like an IG Kara.
And we're all going to be back
version.
here in 10 years, and we're going to be like, let's talk about it.
Somebody actually posed the question to me, why didn't they have Karl work on this? I'm like, well.
I mean, I would like to see Kara get the rights to the original back and remaster it properly. That'd be nice.
Oh, please.
That would be.
But then what would happen to the spinoffs? I guess, would IG still own them? Would they just go into limbo? Maybe we don't have to think about that.
Let's not think about that, and let's just hope that there's physical discs in our region sooner than later, because before.
That's the only way I'm going to be able to watch the Japanese versions and not have any weird ad breaks.
You guys make me want to see the subbed stuff, though. I didn't even consider that the nuance would be different.
It is an interesting contrast.
It's a different contrast. It also makes your second rewatch easier to kind of like pay attention to in our modern world of hey, 50 fucking screens or one screen split up into 6 things.
I don't have a problem with subbed in general. I mean, like this specific series.
Oh,
seeing
yeah.
it subbed. No, I watch a lot of other foreign language series, not just Japanese stuff. But I
feel I prefer with Fooly-Cooly, since a visual element is generally very important.
It's
that
tricky.
I prefer to watch it dubbed, but I do also like to revisit it in Japanese just to see
you
the nuances.
Absolutely lose things in the translation.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
it's unavoidable.
They have to, because so much of the stuff is just like, hey, here's this deep cut reference, and because the original show set that, everything else ultimately sets in motion. Here's a freeze frame. It's like I didn't realize until my third rewatch of Prague that the art exhibit they're showing is an actual real art exhibit, and the show makes more sense in the context of that art exhibit. And you're just like, Jesus, you gotta come me a break.
Is watch it the second time around as a sub, so you get the visual and you can still kind of multitask but know what's coming.
I would say so that you don't multitask, so that you're reading the screen, so that means you're paying full attention, which means anything that's trying to sneak by you has less of a chance to sneak by you, and you can be like, wait a second, I see something there.
I mean, I know people.
Yeah, even then I had to rewind a couple of times to make sure I read a
I've done that with
correctly.
Gintama. Gintama has subtleties.
Oh, that's so so dense sometimes.
But I laugh my ass off when I watch that show. So
it's funny.
Yes,
Any other spicy takes from the talkbacks?
Yeah, well, first a more loving one. At Jazzy_J97 writes in, I love it. I want more. Sad face.
Yeah.
At Toonami Homebase writes in, I enjoyed FLCL Shoegaze a lot more than FLCL Grunge. It is very weird and an interesting way for the FLCL franchise to conclude, but I'm glad that it is finally over, according to Clark Nova. He must be one of those, this never should have existed types. Can we just stop making these?
I mean, glad can also just mean it's at least it's. I mean, if they really enjoyed where it was landing, I can see where it's all oh, hey, we landed on a beat note. Stop. Pull up before this is enough. And
fair, Toonami needed original material, and this was the easy go-to, if you will.
I mean, I'm never going to say no to the various sundry people involved with the Fooly-Cooly getting a chance to flex with it. Like, it's like, oh man, Jason DeMarco and Maki and Pillows and all them. We're all
Maki's a treasure.
Yeah, like all these great people who get to make a thing. It's all like, it's at least, it all feels in a weird way, as cynical as it is, vastly less cynical than like Marvel or Star Wars or any of the Disney stuff, where it's just like it's content machine. Like, this is clearly even with the most cynical angle on it, made with so much more care and passion.
Yeah.
And sincerity.
I agree.
Again, because it's made with all that care and passion and sincerity, I love to see more original work from these people that doesn't have to be bound by the rules of an IP. But
we have all these directors and production staffs that Adult Swim and IG and these folks can tap again for original work in the future. So
I really hope they can. I hope that's my other concern. The more I thought about, like, this is the last Fooly-Cooly, I'm like, I wonder how much anime we're going to get after what we've had announced. Like, I don't know how this is going to work going forward, because Warner as a company changed so damn much.
Oh, let's not get into that.
But I don't want to get into that. But I'm just like, however, whatever may come, this has been a very nice place to be. You know, I'm happy we at least got this far.
We'll see how things go with Uzumaki, I guess.
Well, we got Uzumaki and we've got Lazarus, right?
Whenever that happens.
And Ninja Kamui.
I'm hyped for the Lazarus.
They are saying that Lazarus could potentially get more than one season, which let's hope.
Well,
let's hope it's good and that it gets more than one season.
The metaphor is tantalizing.
Yeah.
At Galactic N Crazy writes in, it definitely was a great send-off for the FLCL alternative and the Adult Swim era of FLCL. If Production IG decides to do more FLCL with another studio in the future, then I hope Adult Swim can make a deal so that they can broadcast the English dub on Toonami.
That's a good take.
Yeah, that's another. You know, there's just because Williams Street can't do it, or won't back it, or can't back it, or whatever. Who knows what IG can do?
Yes, exactly. And I agree. I think this, particularly as a direct sequel to Alternative, is a good note to go off to end this saga. I think arguably better than Alternative itself left things. Because, I like that ending a lot better now, but there's a reason that a lot of people don't.
Sketch, did Josh do any talk back?
You know, he didn't yet. I was looking for that. I was waiting for that spicy take, man.
Too.
But
I need the angry black man take.
He his DVR cut out and he needed to come back to it, and so we won't get Khaki Blue Socks. This is Josh Cajun Samurai's take, other than I got to see how this foolishness ends, and dear Lord, I hope that this is the end.
Well, I think that is probably his take then.
Yeah,
he's so salty about things. It's really fun.
I am curious if he warmed up to this one by the end, but
it does do so much at the end.
It really does.
Flips everything else on its ear that you got to kind of like step back and be like, well, do you reassess it? Or here's the thing, though, is we all picked up on it and we just teased it apart. I do wonder, like, how many people, like, we can hear in the talkbacks, like, clearly didn't scan for everybody what was going on.
Well, people responded pretty positively. Like,
they responded positively, for sure.
They'll either say something generic or they'll say that they didn't like it. Like, we will see that. So, this seems to be...
were some additional talkbacks that, had nothing nice to say, and I really didn't think that they were constructive. So, I didn't bother. If there was a criticism, I felt like I wanted to find one that wasn't just one sentence. So,
like, it sucked.
Yeah.
Bad. Childhood ruined. You watched Fooly-Cooly as a child? I'd say, I got questions.
Fair enough. Then I will put it back that there were people
come on.
didn't like
there
it.
are people who did watch Fooly-Cooly as a child.
I know.
They stayed up and watched it on Adult Swim. For sure. And then they were subjected to blue gender, those poor children.
Oh my god.
I do want to add one little bonus note about how this aired in Canada.
Is that the one where they had the scene with all the the fellatio and crazy shit? Or am I just imagining that?
I think so. I mean, blue aliens, lots of things that look like female anatomy.
I may be confusing this because I watched Anna Mondays on Sci-Fi and they had some crazy shit on that.
Oh, they put some really weird stuff on there.
They did.
How this aired, actually, you mentioning blue gender does remind me. So guess what they finally did after weeks of running Fooly-Cooly in Canada without any anime around it. This last episode airs, and right after it, they run 2 episodes of Housing Complex C, and I'm like, well, Jesus, that's what they should have been doing the last 5 weeks before this.
2 episodes?
Back to back.
I love
Maybe they wanted to do like a Halloween thing.
It just made no sense to me to be like, okay, so you clearly still have this stuff here. You could have at least
that's really
kind
weird.
of couched this stuff, because like the last 5 weeks, it's leading into it, obviously, with comedies, which is fine, whatever. And then it immediately goes back to like some random comedy. And then this 1 week, they're finally like, hey, you know what we should do? We should run this other show that we have.
Why 2 episodes? That's
and they are and they are going back and running all 4 on October 28th.
Oh, really?
So I guess they just wanted to hold it back. It's the only other show they've got. So
no, it's a good
maybe they're
call.
like, oh,
and it should be watched all 4 in a row.
It really should.
Yeah, yes. I don't know why Toonami in the U.S. is not making use of that show at all this Halloween season.
Yeah,
I was like,
it is
cool,
spooky.
Sure, My Hero marathon to finish off the rerun, fine, but why not Housing Complex? It's thematically appropriate.
Low-hanging fruit.
Yeah. I mean, maybe they're saving it.
Strapped for stuff as they were this entire month. I don't know why they didn't just rerun it week to week, even.
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
But
let's not go crazy.
I digress.
But yeah, no,
really 2 episodes, because I thought what they were going to do is they were going to start it on the same week of Shoegaze ending, and then the next week, over the next 3 weeks, the 3 episodes of Grunge would air next to 1 episode of Housing Complex, and by the time you get to the end of Grunge, that would end Housing Complex.
Nope.
Yeah, but that would make sense.
Yeah, that would make sense.
However, it's Adult Swim Canada. Better things aren't possible.
I guess so. Wow.
No, it just with the second they did that, I'm like, geez, they could have, like, that would have been, even though, yes, strictly speaking, they would have been already sort of in a reloop. Just if that had been an hour of complete programming, because also the other thing that surprised me was like, okay, you're going from this very uplifting, positive, self-actualized ending of Fooly-Cooly Shoegaze right into like Housing Complex C, a show that is spooky, and you wouldn't know it by looking at it, but it's even designed by like Abe and Yoshitoshi Abe, who like knows how to make you feel spooky when he wants to. And it worked fine. It was fine. I was just like, yeah, that's what, like, it was just so obvious. It's like, oh yeah, you should just be running. If you have 2 anime, run them back to back as part of like making this stuff feel like a cohesive product. So
also
if I have a complaint, it's meta.
They also run like Harley Quinn and Young Justice in different time slots on the station. They could easily bring all of that together.
Yeah.
But they choose not to.
If they had let in with a DC, I think would be really great, because you could
They actually do lead in with a
DC
movie every week for some and they always end early, and for some reason they use an episode of Robot Chicken as filler.
Yeah, and it's just the wrong thing. Yeah. Wrong thing. They'd be better off with an infomercial. If they ran Too Many Cooks before every airing.
Yeah, for one of the airings they did run for one of the Grunge or Shoegaze.
Man, if they got 12 minutes to spare, they should play Ball Masters.
They actually, that would actually be perfect.
Ball Masters back. That'd be way better.
That would actually be perfect.
That has been a Toonami.
Perfect hair forever.
Oh my God.
Were there any more talkbacks?
There are.
Oh boy.
At Teen Gohan Fight writes in, show itself was okay, but I don't like the fact that they never brought back any of the OG characters other than Haruko in any of the FLCL sequel series. Excuse me? I guess you didn't watch Grunge, because they did bring back Amuro. They've also brought back Adamesk.
Yeah. And in multiple forms.
And
giant fat bird form.
Conti,
penis form.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've had many Conti-alikes. I'm actually kind of glad they let Conti sort of be sacred, and they like reuse the design, but obviously he's it's like we saw the good stormtrooper and everyone else is a clone, like kind of stuff like that. It's great.
Mm-hmm.
They're smart. They know where to hold the line.
Yeah. At Big Mac Sama writes in, I thought it was good, though I was miffed that Haruko wasn't in this season like she always does, but it was good on its own. Other than that, the rest was good.
Okay.
Didn't need to be here. Yeah, didn't.
Yeah, I don't think she needed to be here.
No, she wouldn't have brought anything to this particular story.
And this person feels very strongly about the lack of Haruko. At Brad Not46 writes in, I don't see how this show could truly be FLCL without Haruko.
Interesting. Yeah, I knew somebody was.
Somebody had to feel that.
Way,
Yeah. I understand that, but there's so many other elements to Fooly-Cooly that you don't need Haruko to make it explicitly in the Fooly-Cooly multiverse, as it were.
46, I hope you are listening, because maybe these 3 recordings will give you a rethink of that.
And
hopefully it makes sense now why they did this.
One last one for the road. At Anta-sama1 writes in, FLCL lore is so confusing. Fair.
The lore doesn't matter nearly so much.
It doesn't matter.
It's all window dressing for whatever the. Yeah,
the only people that think the lore of FLCL, the original, mattered are the people that wrote Progressive. Zing.
And even they kind of pretty loose with it. Like it's there, but it's still not. It's still window dressing on Hidomi. Like it's just there for like Hidomi's like self-actualization. That's like they're like, yeah. It's funny. It's like the lore has always been convoluted, subject to whatever is convenient. For how do we navigate our protagonists through what they're supposed to do. And like now more than ever, like I think Shoegaze is definitely the biggest rejection of that. It's like there's imaginary space, there's all this shit. None of it matters. All that matters is like, Asaki realizing that he loves Hidomi no matter what, or not Hidomi, Harumi no matter what. That's it. That's it. That's the takeaway. Hey, your boring small town life sucks. Find somebody who you care about and literally cross dimensions, and things will be okay.
Aww. I like that.
It's in some ways the most upbeat and sincere ending anything in this universe has gotten.
On that note, then, sketch.
Yeah,
that's a really nice way to end the podcast, in my opinion.
I agree.
I agree.
Apologies for talking over everybody.
No, it's fine. It's fine. So, if you actually had any additional thoughts on any of these Fooly-Coolies or anything related to Toonami, you can email us at podcast@ToonamiFaithful.com or use the hashtag ToonamiTalkback on Twitter. You can follow us on Facebook.com/ToonamiFaithfulPodcast and on Twitter @ToonamiPodcast. You can listen to the podcast on just about everything, including Apple Podcasts, CastBox, Deezer, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Overcast, Podbay, Podbean, Podcast Addict, Radio.com, Spotify, or in the TuneIn app. And you can find every episode of the podcast to stream online at SoundCloud.com/Toonami Faithful Podcast and get the latest news by following @Toonami News on Twitter and read the news, views, and reviews on ToonamiFaithful.com. Karl, we'll start with you. Where can the folks find you?
You can find me at my website, KarlRolson.com. Also, you can find my music at ultraclystron.com. Right now, that redirects to Bandcamp. Who knows if that'll exist by the time this episode actually airs. So there you go. And also, the KarlOlson.com is my handle on Blue Sky, which is probably the social media I use most these days, but it's also Karl Olson, my handle on Insta and Facebook, and even the X site, but I'm never there anymore, so don't bother. Otherwise, that's where I'm at, and it's been fun chatting.
Thanks.
Shall I hand it off?
Hand it off to your
Jesse,
Canadian brethren.
Jesse, where can they find you? And also, ironically, sometimes me.
So my podcast is Zonan Canada. It's a podcast that explores the connections between anime and Canadian media. You can find that at zonan.ca and on SoundCloud, on Apple Podcasts, on Google and Spotify, pretty much everywhere you can find podcasts. I have an upcoming episode on the French-Canadian dub of Heidi. I know I maybe didn't have that much to say in the episode we did today, but I have a lot to say about that. And that episode might be out before this one is. I think probably next week is when I'll be done editing it. So just keep an eye out for it. You can find me on Blue Sky. That is also the social media where I'm most active. I'm not too active on anything right now, but I'm there at Betteridge. And I am still on Twitter as well. I am keeping a foot in there for now, but I'm not going to be posting too much. But if that's what you use, you can find me there as well, Betteridge.
All right. Kuro, tell them where they can find you.
I'm not as prolific on the social media, unfortunately. So pretty much on the site formerly known as Twitter.
Is it unfortunate, though?
I guess. I mean, I have an Instagram. I just don't do anything with it. Eventually, guys, I'll get my shit together and I'll do something with it. But right now, it's not going to happen. You can find me on the site formerly known as Twitter at HappyKuroKitty. And, contact Toonami, faithful.com. That works too. That's pretty much it.
And you can find me on Twitter at Sketch1984. I'm also on Blue Sky at Sketch1984. And I'm sorry, we're not quite done because I wanted to reiterate the upcoming schedules, even though this episode might not be out before this first marathon airs, that being October 21st. They will be playing all 3 episodes of Fooly-Cooly Grunge back to back to back, followed by 2 new episodes of Naruto Shippuden. It's canon. It's not filler anymore. And then the usual My Hero Academia rerun. On October 28th, they will be playing all 3 episodes of Fooly-Cooly Shoegaze back to back to back, followed by 3 reruns of My Hero Academia, which will finish off the rerun of Season 6, which means the block has a lot of changes probably coming in November, and we have no idea what they will be. So, here's hoping it's good. They are doing a same-day dub for Dr. Stone right now, so that gives me a little bit of hope that could be on Toonami in November. And Scavengers is supposed to air on Adult Swim at some point. And DeMarco has said if it airs on Adult Swim, it will air on Toonami.
It looks cool.
It does. It looks very cool.
Yeah, I'm looking
be
forward to
out
that
before this podcast. At least the first episode will be out before this podcast on Max, which it looks fantastic. Scavengers, definitely worth your look.
Yeah.
And other Toonami news of exciting proportions at Discotheque Day the other day, which is something that we kind of pushed off this podcast to experience. For good reason, I guess, because towards the end of their presentation, they announced IGPX is coming to Blu-ray with a new remaster. Of course, our friend of the show and previous host, Jose Argamedo, is involved, but he's hush-hush on the details. He would not tell me anything yet, but I'm sure eventually he'll say something. And I'm excited to buy it a third time.
A lot of people asked for this. This was something that's come up several times, so it's a good thing.
I had all but given up hope on ever getting a better release of IGPX, but
considering how much work they put into their initial release, the idea that they were going to be able to one-up it.
A lot of work in that.
Yeah, well, and Jose making a habit of various and sundry upscaling experiments and so on and so forth, specifically with IGPX footage, like it couldn't be in better hands anywhere on Earth. So
truly
look forward to it.
Yes, please support this release. It is definitely going to be worth your money.
And if you want to try a little bit of that IGPX remaster before you buy, Toonami will be airing the first 2 HD remastered episodes as the DST Extra Hour on November 4th. Before that, the schedule is not very exciting. It's literally 2 airings of the Attack on Titan special that aired in September. Yeah. 2 airings of the same special. One at midnight, one at 1:30. And then for the bonus hour, you get the first 2 episodes of IGPX. Now, let's not get it too ahead of ourselves here, folks. It's still in production, according to Jose, so as nice as it would be to get a full run of IGPX in November, maybe not going to happen. At least not in November, not yet. They may surprise us, but it's a pretty tall order. However, we do have one other schedule update, and that is that Dr. Stone New World Part 2 will start on Toonami on November 11th. No time slot was listed, no schedule was listed, which means there's still a lot of questions left to be answered. But at least we know Senku and the gang are coming back early in November. It's wonderful news. And with that, I return you to the rest of this conversation.
And good news, all the discotheque stuff that was on Right Stuff has moved over to the Crunchyroll store, and they will even be selling the live action stuff, despite what that person from Media Blasters was saying about live action stuff.
Why is that good news?
It's good news because it's still available.
And
it exists.
Just has more shit that they control.
Yeah, truly. I'm really, really not happy about Right Stuff closing. But
Jesse, how are we doing in Canada with this?
Oh yeah,
with Right Stuff versus the Crunchyroll store.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
To be determined. I've never ordered anything from the Crunchyroll store. I'm assuming it's going to be more or less the same. I'm assuming that Sony is not going to open a distribution center in Canada, despite the fact that they're obviously able to. So
the fact they probably run one here.
They probably already have something they can use, and then they will not do it. So that's my expectation.
Unfortunate. So yeah, that's some interesting.
I was going to say the Cyber 6 Blu-ray is still not on the Crunchyroll store. That did not carry over.
That is concerning.
Yeah.
They're still figuring it out.
I think it just slipped through the cracks. It'll be there soon.
It's possible. I mean, as much as I don't want to buy things directly from Crunchyroll, I don't want to buy things from Amazon. So it's which questionable company do I want to support today?
Yeah.
and Best Buy is not carrying DVDs or Blu-rays anymore starting next year.
Yeah, that is not surprising considering the state of their home media section currently. But man, I was really hoping we'd get at least a couple more years. And people are like, I'm going to stop buying physical games at Best Buy. Oh yeah, that's a real good idea. That'll definitely make them keep selling games physically.
I mean, you complain about the quality of their home media section. When I went to a Best Buy in Spokane, and they had a bunch of copies of the Community Blu-ray set, which is impossible to get in Canada. So,
that's pretty good.
My problem with Best Buy has always been that their prices are not competitive enough.
Oh, here our Best Buy stopped carrying physical media like a bazillion years ago, except for the game section, which is almost always sold out of anything that isn't a gigantic title or a Call of Duty. So you end up going across the street to the GameStop in the same parking lot anyways. So welcome to our world.
They definitely, I've seen them carry stuff. It's just...
it's...
I could get a better price.
Yeah, the game section is usually pretty picked over the Best Buys around here too.
No, like it's
they
if you order
like vultures.
If you order online, ship to store, you can get pretty much anything. But at that point, why not just ship it to yourself?
Exactly.
Why give yourself an errand? I do actually like picking up stuff directly at Best Buy, but I won't be doing much of that in the future, I guess.
I had one last stray thought about Shoegaze after all of our Twitter slander.
Oh, yeah?
It's just like, Elon Musk is such a fucking conda.
Oh, man, isn't he, though?
We love talking shit about him on this podcast.
Oh,
was just sitting there. I had to.
He's so icky.
You hit the nail on the X.
Oh. Cut. This is it.
Well,
you guys, this is where we cut.
On the next all-new episode of Rick and Morty.
Rick, thanks for coming. We need a crack team for this one. Rick, meet Flea-Flat. He might be able to tell the future.
Might?
We're waiting to find out. Onyx here is a weapons specialist, and our eye in the sky is my chief of staff bot, Chi-Chi.
Sleek.
Yes, an excellent team.
Danger! Wow, that's great, buddy. It's going right on the fridge.
All new Rick and Morty next Sunday at 11 p.m. only on Adult Swim.